I'm the leading scholar in the subject of remote viewing as it's done using those methodologies, military or military-derived methodologies. And what it is, it's a mental procedure where in the old days people would have called it psychic, but we don't like that word because it's associated with people who do other things. These are very highly structured data collection methodologies where people are trained to perceive images, senses, all the five senses, hearing, touch, sight, taste, and smell, across time and space, to be able to perceive things in the past, present, and the future at any distance as well. Now, this totally violates the classical and relativistic laws of physics, of course. So we now understand that both Newtonian and Einsteinian physics are subsets of a much larger reality and an entire new collection of physical principles, physical understandings, physical laws. A whole new physics is going to be necessary, and that the delay in recognizing this on the mainstream is simply because the implications are so profound, so big, people are having a very difficult time wrapping their head around it. Remote viewing is a mental procedure where people actually go into a room at a desk. They're doing this totally under blind conditions, meaning a remote viewer cannot work if they know anything at all about the thing they're supposed to be perceiving. Like that so-called thing is called a target, which can be people, events, places across time and space. And the remote viewer sits down at a desk with a pad of paper and a pen, and an hour later comes out with like 20 pages of detailed data following a very structured data collection, a set of procedures describing that target, that thing that they were supposed to be perceived. Again, without knowing anything about it. The only thing they were told is, there is a target, describe it. I've never been interested in the Atlantis legend, and we did not use the word Atlantis for this project when it was started. In fact, I always thought the whole Atlantis legend was something like, 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, just a fiction movie, just a crazy idea. I never thought of it in terms of something that was real. But we have some images that were on Google Earth on the bottom of the ocean. And one of them, 1,000 miles west of Morocco and Portugal, 3 miles deep, it looks like a dead ringer for a submerged, huge metropolitan city, and it's covered with sediment. And also there was another anomaly at the bottom of the ocean, and that is a series, a rectangular grid, like a checkerboard, of holes in the ground. They're clearly artificial. And so I said, that looks like a mining operation, so let's find out what that is as well. And so I said, let's just send two really good remote viewers. So I sent Dick Algeier and Deborah Duggan Takagi to those locations to take a look using totally blind procedures. The whole remote viewing using a number of different descriptions for targets to get what the locations looked like now, plus also what they looked like when they were at the prime before they were underwater, and also what the locations looked like just at the moment they went underwater. So that whole set of remote viewing took about 7 targets, and it took about a year for both remote viewers to finish them. During that entire year, they had no idea what they were remote viewing. All they knew is there was a target, remote view it, period. They came in with spot-on data. I mean, they described the anomaly 1,000 miles west of Morocco and Portugal, 3 miles deep. They described an ancient city in ruins that was submerged. It was submerged by a sudden inundation. And then they described what it was at the moment that it was being submerged. And they described what it was beforehand. So we said, okay, I'm going to use this word Atlantis to describe it. By the way, I should mention also at the time that we were doing this, near the end, just when we were wrapping up the remote viewing, Google Earth came out with a 2.0 version of their underwater imagery. And as you can imagine, most of the anomaly was erased. And so I looked at it, this new imagery, and I said, the only thing that happened, in my opinion, and it's very clear when you look at the actual pictures, is very high compression algorithms were used to smooth the bottom, to smooth the data. So basically what it does is compression takes raw file sizes, which are way too big to use for Google Earth, and finds pixels that are similar in value, and nearby and gives them the same value. So it doesn't have to remember so many numbers. And that works okay as long as the compression is not extreme. But if the compression is extreme, you get situations where the color gradient is completely washed out and you get just one color. And the evidence of that is when you get those patches, very large patches of one color that follow pixel lines. So that's what we see. We see these very large patches right on the anomaly that follow the pixel lines exactly. And inside these patches is just one color. You can make the Rocky Mountains look smooth if you compress it long enough. And so I said, what we need is another way of getting this stuff. So when we did the remote viewing, these were really great remote viewers. These are not people that get ambiguous data, a line here, a line there, and you're trying to interpret that. These are really great people that have really good drawing skills, really good artistic skills in being able to sketch out what it is that they're seeing. And these descriptions are totally unambiguous. The pictures are as clear as day. Underwater, large imagery, structures on the bottom of the ocean that covered with sediment, the whole thing. Now I can sort of cut to the chase a little bit and say that the civilization component that was 1,000 miles west of Morocco and Portugal, 3 miles deep, think of a very large urban area in which the architecture was of the vaulted ceilings, grand archways, but they did, you know, of the type that you'd see, say, in New York during the 1940s and 50s. So the area down in the Antarctica region that we also have images for, that rectangular grid of holes, that was not like that. There the architecture was more like a modern skyscraper type with squared off buildings. So that was a military, scientific, industrial complex down there. And the floors for the buildings often went as deep as they went up. So they were very deeply submerged as well as going up into the air. So that was also the area where a major secrecy-cloaked scientific experiment was being done that led to their demise. So basically what happened was they had a source of energy that was very clean, crystalline based, and they could have powered their entire civilization on that, but they were also looking lustfully at the heat that's in the center of the planet. And what they did is they had a project to drill through the crust of the Earth to get to the heat below. Now, I'm going to say this. We have major calamities that grind humanity down to a pulp every few thousand years. We're okay for 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 years, and it seems like everything's okay, but something happens which knocks us down to nothing. You can read Robert Schoch's book, Forgotten Civilization, is largely about places like Easter Island, but also Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, which is a large archaeological site and, you know, extensive stone structures that were also living environments that they purposely buried, meaning they had them, they were on the surface, and then they buried them as if they were trying to protect themselves from something coming above, like a solar coronal mass ejection or something. And they buried it, and it's only now being excavated, but the excavations are ongoing. These are huge archaeological sites, and the carbon dating on the sites is absolutely unambiguous. They go back at least 10,000 years. The mainstream archaeologists, the ones you get at the university, they're connecting the dots with the archaeological evidence, but they're connecting only the dots that they want. They have a preconceived theory that mainstream science wants to support, that civilization happened only 3,000 years ago. Before that, we were all hunter-gatherers. But they're omitting a whole bunch of data that don't fit their theory. So that's what's going on with mainstream archaeology. There's tremendous amounts of data that are simply not being examined and being forcefully suppressed. And so something happens to knock this planet down to the human component of this planet down to nothing. So what happened with this Atlantean civilization is they lucked out. They were left alone in terms of these natural calamities long enough to develop technology. And their technology was about 100 years more advanced than what we have today. So we are very close to what they were. So what they did is they decided to drill in a secrecy-cloaked scientific experiment. They didn't announce to the public that this is what they were doing. And they did this off the coast of what we now know as Australia, east of Sydney in the direction of New Zealand. They essentially built like a tunnel straight through the crust, huge drill bits, and they thought they could control it. And when it actually happened, the DVD, we show it and really clear, we bring it out, put it all together in chronological order. They had about 5 days to watch their experiment go belly up. And they realized it was, they were going to have a potentially extinction level event. And they blew a hole in the size of the planet that had an explosion approximately the size of Australia. It was huge, the explosion. Now, what happened? Why do we know that's where it was? And I'll also tell you we know when it happened. It happened 70,000 years ago. That was not long ago. So why do we know it happened there? First of all, off the coast of Australia, that's called the Admiralty area, and the direction of New Zealand, that's the thinnest spot on the crust. Also, it's the largest concentration of lava rock anywhere on the planet. Also, it is the exact, not approximate, the exact antipode, which is the exact opposite spot on the globe from the anomaly that we're looking at 1,000 miles west of Morocco and Portugal, 3 miles deep. The antipode is the exact opposite spot. Now, when you blow a hole in the crust of a balloon, like the Earth, you're releasing a lot of pressure. So you're going to have to get a dent or an indentation somewhere to compensate for that lack of pressure. Where will that dent happen? It happens in the antipode, the exact opposite spot. So they blew a hole out in the area near New Zealand, and the antipode, which is the area 1,000 miles west of Morocco and Portugal, that sunk. And that's what happened. It was secrecy cloak science. And during the 5 days, and the remote viewers were great in describing the entire detail, all under totally blind conditions, which is amazing if you think about it. By the way, some of the technology is still down there, and some of it is still radiating energy, apparently. In terms of the Antarctic region, I can now answer a mystery. Why are there so many governmental digs, US, Russia, China? Why are there so many governmental digs going on in Antarctica? I guarantee you they're not looking for mastodon bones. I mean, the reason there's so much governmental activity digging in Antarctica with bases and so on in Antarctica is they're looking for technology. There's stuff under the ice, and it's easier to get that technology by digging through the ice, even under the harsh conditions of Antarctica, than it is to go 3 miles deep off the coast of Morocco and Portugal into the ocean. So that's what they're doing down there. So, you might sort of wonder why this big governmental investment in Antarctica when all you have down there is ice. It's not ice. They've got stuff down there, technology that's, potentially 100 years more advanced than we have here, which is sort of close, but I mean, we could understand it and utilize it. Anyway, the big bottom line message for this, and this comes across clearly in the DVD, is we're very close to being able to repeat the same mistakes that we did in the past. And that's why people have to know the story. I can also say why we know it 70,000 years ago. There's something called the Toba catastrophe theory. Toba catastrophe theory. And you can look it up in Wikipedia. T-O-B-A, Tango Oscar Bravo Alpha. Toba catastrophe theory. And that refers to Lake Toba in Indonesia, where they think a volcano blew up and killed off all humans on the planet 70,000 years ago, except for 2, 4, 6, 8,000 surviving pairs of people. Meaning there may have been more survivors, but only 2, 4, 6, 8,000 pairs of people were having babies. So we are all descendants from those 2, 4, 6, 8,000 pairs of people that survived. This information is known by the geneticists. And the geneticists have determined that this event happened about 70,000 years ago, and that this is how many people survived. And it was a horrific volcanic event. This much they're pretty much in agreement with. And they almost got it correct. They think Lake Toba in Indonesia. That's actually not where it happened. But in terms, if you look at the globe, you're still in the right area of the globe. Indonesia and Lake Toba, that's on the other side of Australia. So they're still in the same ballpark area, but instead of going to the west side of Australia, the north, actually it's the north side of Australia, you need to go to the southeast side of Australia. But you're still talking in the same general area. So they basically got it right. So the where the actual drilling and the blowout occurred was east of Sydney, in the direction of New Zealand. That's where the blowout actually occurred. And again, the evidence of this is it's the exact antipode of the civilization component that sunk, that we have clear pictures of. And also that spot is the thinnest crust in the planet. And it's also got the largest, by far, concentration of lava rock anywhere on the planet. So it's clear that that's where the blowout occurred. The remote viewing data clearly shows it wasn't a particularly warm area. It wasn't like tropical rainforest or anything like that. But it wasn't Antarctica covered in ice. And if you look at other archaeological data, some of which is described by Robert Schoch, he's a geophysicist, in his book Forgotten Civilization, the ice patterns that we now know of down in Antarctica are, we're clearly not there. In fact, the last ice age melted just a few thousand years ago. So, and when that, and we have regular, pole shifts, magnetic pole shifts as well. So we have had, if you think in terms of 400,000 years, we've had many cycles where there was essentially no ice down there, and then essentially more ice. So, it goes back and forth, waxing and waning, ebbing and flowing. So the idea is that being ice for the last 400,000 years, yes, there are people that say that, but they're just plain dead wrong.